Good morning Zimbabwe. Good morning everybody. Ndadzoka manje muri yeZimbabwe. Pakaipa pari kupisa. Right. Chakaitika nezuro ndechekuti Rutendo Matinyarare akazokumbira apology, akabayira apology, akakumbira regerero kuna President Emerson Mnangagwa ne first family yese zvayo kusvika kuvana, kuvazukuru, akakumbira regerero even kitsi zaMnangagwa kana chero kana kuimbwa kana kune madzvinyo anenge ari ikoko futi akakumbira regerero kune chese chinonzi first family. Chero mashosha anofamba nemustate house akakumbirwa regerero ne this guy, neshiri dzinenge dzichibhururuka dzakakumbirwa regerero. Reason iripo ndeyekuti panga pa flash kwa 300 series. That one is a big car, honestly speaking. Atidi unyeberana zvedu because vanhu vazhinji kwatona vana drive mota idzodzo zvavo avatowanika kune nzvimbo dzese zvekumhanya. Ipapo I agree and I admit, but chakakonzeresa kuti Rutendo akumbire regerero chi? Toti munzwire from the horse's mouth, because most of the times vanhu vanozotanga kuti iwo but uri kungotaura nyaya toda kunzwa iye achitaura nhasi. Mira ndinzwa ndiri kunzwa kuda kuvhura hombe, so nhasi ndiri kunzwa kuda kungovhura hombe, but mira tisati tatanga kutaura naye Rutendo panapa. There is this posts yaakabuda achitaura zvoni. I also considered that if indeed the president or Amai feel that any of my critique bordered on disrespect, I, as a child of Zimbabwe who has served the country loyally, would be willing to apologize to eliminate any notion that I advocate for the disrespect of our leaders. Right? Do you know kuti taura kandishaya mkomana youth commissary and macommissary akabuda achitaura kuti isu zvitoziva munhu kana achinge anzi prodigal son anotanga nekukumbira regerero first asati atombotaura anything. Achinotanga ruregerero kuti nditokumbira ruregerero tobataziva kuti mwana muparadzi aita sei adzoka. Saka kana muchinge mangomhanya kupa munhu mota, muda kungomupa mota imimi kuti aite sei, kuti wagona basa rero wadii asati akumbira regerero. Idhiri ripi ramuri kuita, ibhora ripi, ende tungwarira anombobvira ateerera vanhu vacho, especially vanhu vakaita sevava ateerere, because vanhu anenge achivati imi munoteerera tagwere, you can't save two masters at one time. Iwo ndonoteerera murungu wako kana kuti boss wako, uyo akugadzirawo mamwe mabhiza ake kana kuti new horses ari kutanga kuda kunoningirana. Ende nyaya imwe iripo ndeye 200,000 yagara yasetwa zvikanzi iyi wochimira kutukana namai Mnangagwa naMnangagwa nevana vaMnangagwa, family dzacho dzese nekatsi dzacho futi usatukane nadzo, netumbwa twacho nemadzvinyi nemazongororo ipapo usatukane nawo, anything to do with the first family. Saka toda kuti tinzwe from the horse's mouth. Rutendo wakapuwa mari, ndo zvatoda kunzwa panapa. Iwe Rutendo wakarohwa here, chii chazoitika, ende choruda unotaura natungwarira choda mbonotaura inyaya dzei dzamuda unotaura pamuda on the ground table, because chingotaurana ndicho uri kuti wakashanda wakabvisa masanction. Zviri kuzikana kuti kana wakabvisa handiti chingotaura akachingosenda ma-invoices ako zvoita sei zvopera. Uri kuti une zvikwereti kuSouth Africa zvema-lawyers, uri kuti une chakati zvakawanda zvouri kutaura. Kochingo zvine need here kuti mende unogara pasi round table, iwo munhu akakukwereta ndi uri kumuziva, proof unayo, round table yeuri kuenda unodiscussa nyaya dzechi. Ndio zvatoda kunzwa zvizere kuna Rutendo. I think mubvunzo yese ndangogara ndangoisa ka 1 because I don't want to interrupt you. Over to you, sir.
I have got to say, people want answers. So before I start addressing some of these issues, I just wanted to put something on the table. I've never come to anybody to say, I am going to lead a political party. I want you guys to become members of my political party. I want you guys to give me a mandate. And I want you guys to elect me into office to do a certain job and a certain mandate. And I've never read out a manifesto where I said, this is what I'm going to deliver. And therefore, when I do not deliver what it is that I promised, people come and want to hold me accountable. But having said that, I also understand that I am a very strong personality. I've got very strong views. And sometimes people get to buy into my views Sometimes people get to believe in what it is that I articulate. And as such, those people begin to have certain expectations of me, even though we have got no agreement that I have to meet up with those expectations or I've got to do certain things. But because I understand that I have brought up certain strong emotions, certain strong expectations, despite me not promising anyone anything, I owe people an explanation who believe and buy into what I stand for and who believe and buy into who I am. And that's why I'm here. I'm explaining not because I owe anyone an explanation, but I'm explaining because I know that there's a lot of people with a lot of goodwill in me. Now, what is confusing is, you will see that I'm being currently hated by Varakashi. There are a lot of Varakashi that are very unhappy about where I am standing now, where I am having a conversation with Dr. Tungwarara, the president's advisor. And then there are those in the opposition who are also feeling heavily betrayed, feeling like I've sold out because I've accepted the gesture from the president's advisor and I've accepted to go and sit at a round table to go and listen to them. So what it means is I can't be right. If I continue to fight, standing on the perspective of saying I don't negotiate with anybody who is supporting CAB3, I will not speak to anybody that is talking about CAB3, I will not even take a gesture of appreciation from them, I'm going to continue to fight, I'm going to continue to throw stones, I'll be hated by the Varakashi, I'll be hated by probably the leadership, I'll be hated by everybody. If I also take the opportunity to say we've been arguing, some of us, and I continue to stand on being against CAB3. I continue to stand against the principles upon which CAB3 have been established. And if I continue to say I will not negotiate with those people that are in power, then what is the point of the fight? Because surely you do not believe that continuing to oppose CAB3 is the way that we're going to stop CAB3. Surely you guys are not naive enough to understand, to think that just because we've got loud voices and influence, that is how we're going to stop CAB3. There are very many things that can happen for us to get to a point where we alter the trajectory, where we get to get some concessions, give our thoughts, and then those that we're talking to can decide whether they're going to make some alterations or not, but that can't happen without us having negotiations. That can't happen with us having talks. So what Tungwarara has simply said is, my brother, you've been throwing stones, you've been going against CAB, we feel to some extent that you've also been attacking the president, so why don't we sit and why don't we have a conversation? Within that, he said, I appreciate the work that you've done. And I feel that you've not been appreciated. I want to give you a car, no holds barred. No strings attached. Have a car and then come to the table and let's sit and let's talk. And what is interesting is some of the discussions have already started happening behind the scenes, offline, after he made this appeal. And he has come to me and he said to me, what are your issues? Why are you opposed to CAB3? And I don't think I have to articulate why I'm opposed to CAB3 because I think I've put it in writing. That writing has not been taken offline. It continues to be there now. Any one of you can go and understand my issues with CAB3. And some of those issues have not only resonated with you, people who are opposed to ZANU-PF, they've even resonated with ZANU-PF itself. And I'll give you a perfect example. Many people have thought that CAB3 is about President Mnangagwa continuing with his tenure. And many have believed that if CAB3 comes into effect, effectively, President Mnangagwa continues and will go until 2030 or whenever else that he wants to go until. But until I started bringing up arguments and write-ups that start to say, it's not as easy as that. Because if CAB3 passes in the current form that it is in, without having a referendum to change Section 328, it's going to be very difficult for the president to continue until 2030 because he will not have a legal mandate to do so. And as such, he could be challenged by some of these partners that are with him in CAB3. They could challenge him, they could send people to challenge legally that he cannot go until 2030 because he has no mandate, and the Constitution prohibits those people that make a change and an amendment to the Constitution to actually enjoy that extension. So this could mean that we could still find ourselves going for elections in 2028. And we could find the people that are going to sponsor this legal challenge to the current president going until 2030 coming from among his same allies who could use Trojan horses around. Why? Because some of them are no longer patient enough to wait for President Mnangagwa to finish in 2030 before they leave. I've articulated that. And that has not only resonated with the opposition, it has resonated with people in ZANU-PF recognizing some of the unseen threats that lie with CAB3. There are people who are pretending to be friends of the president who are already impatient and want to kick out the president before 2030 so that they can become presidents. These are aspects that nobody knew before some of us began to articulate them. And as such, CAB3 is now being looked at with a different lens by even the insiders in ZANU-PF. Because of this open criticism of CAB3, we have brought pros and cons for those in ZANU-PF to understand. We have brought pros and cons for those outside ZANU-PF to understand. And now we've got factions, both in the opposition and in ZANU-PF, who are finding reasons to also oppose CAB3 because of the threats that it poses. But what I'm now bringing to you is that we've even brought arguments about CAB3, that the architects of CAB3 themselves must begin to see the threats that are lying within CAB3, because the moment that CAB3 passes, and if it is able to withstand legal challenge in court, you're going to see that even the president himself might find himself being challenged by people within ZANU-PF, people who've been working with him on CAB3, who are no longer patient enough to wait until 2030 because they want power now, and they believe that they've got the power, they've got the money to buy the power today. Hence, they will begin to fight the very same president. So, people like me who oppose ZANU-PF, who oppose the opposition, we give scenario analysis to the extent that we put game theory on the table to put all the possible scenarios on the table for everybody to fully understand the pros and the cons. And so I've given the opposition the pros and the cons of CAB3, but I've also given those who support CAB3 the pros and the cons of CAB3 today, saying to them that some of the people that are now going to be contesting for presidency, because they've got the money and because CAB3 enables it, are people that even those people that wanted CAB3 might not want to be in power. The power struggle that might come after CAB3 is a power struggle that even ZANU-PF and those who are proponents of CAB3 might not want. These are the things that we've put on the table. And so when Tungwarara says, come, my brother, let's sit down, let's talk. These are the conversations that we are going to be having. Because I am going to challenge Tungwarara and say, Tungwarara, are you ready for a presidency without President Emerson Mnangagwa, who you support today? Do you realize that CAB3 allows, and will pay, in the current form, will allow people to challenge President Emerson Mnangagwa to say, you can't go to 2030 because you did not change Section 328 of the Constitution, so in 2028. And when that happens, I'm going to be asking Tungwarara, are you ready for the candidates that might rise up wanting to be president? Are you ready for those candidates who have already bought the goodwill of your parliamentarians, who might elect some of the people around you as president over President Mnangagwa? Those are conversations we're going to have. Conversations that right now, I'm the only person bringing such arguments onto the table. And if I'm not sitting in a negotiating table saying these things to Tungwarara, nobody else will say them. Nobody else will bravely say to Tungwarara, do you know that there are certain billionaires and multimillionaires in ZANU-PF that could actually challenge President Emerson Mnangagwa's ability to go to 2030, and if those billionaires succeed, those billionaires will be vying for the presidency of the country, and are we ready for those billionaires to be president? Those are issues and arguments that will never come to any table that ZANU-PF is sitting on or the opposition is sitting on, unless you've got a rogue person like me who is not afraid to say things that other people are not saying, and who is seeing the chessboard for what it is and is able to come up with the game theory alternatives and possibilities that are there. And I'm sure many of you right now listening to what I'm saying, you never thought of it possible. You never thought it possible that Wicknell could actually run and become president of Zimbabwe. I'm sure very few of you here had ever thought about that. I'm sure that very few, Kudata Gray himself never sat and thought that if he was to stand in an election by parliament with Wicknell Chivayo or Scott Sakpanya, he might even lose to Wicknell Chivayo, who's carrying 3 million Mapostori on his back, is carrying Manwe Zion on his back, and is carrying the youth who aspire to have Wicknell buy them a car at some point on his back. Kuda doesn't have that kind of support. But did anybody tell Kuda this before? Did anybody tell this to the president before? Did ZANU-PF even see this as an alternative? Did Kuda see this as an alternative before? Did Kuda ever see that Wicknell Chivayo might actually be the most viable candidate with the current conditions that have been created by CAB3? I don't think so. I don't think many of you saw it. But those are now the possibilities that are brought up by people like me who are bringing up the scenarios. So when I have an opportunity to sit with the president's advisor, the president who has got a cabinet that created CAB3, the president who must sign CAB3 into law, when we bring up all these potential scenarios that may disadvantage or advantage the president, surely it can change the metrics. Surely it can change the calculus. Surely it can change the decision that the president ultimately makes when this bill comes to him. I've also brought up arguments for parliamentarians to say, when you're sitting in parliament, what are the processes that are going to play themselves out? And what is your role as a parliamentarian? When the first reading comes up, what are you supposed to do as a parliamentarian? When you're arguing the merits and the rationale and the principles of the CAB3, what is your responsibility as a parliamentarian to argue? We've gone on to say on the second reading, when you're supposed to go through clause by clause by clause by clause, when you're supposed to look at the benefits or the disbenefits for the Zimbabwean people, what are you supposed to do? And we've heard some of the arguments made by our parliamentarians in parliament on CAB3, mirroring some of the arguments we brought up online. Whether they were influenced by me or not, the point is we've educated each other. We've shared enough information. I have learned from others. There are people like Justice Mahoney here who taught me about the systems and processes of ZANU-PF to the extent that I went to read the ZANU-PF constitution. I went to read how resolutions come up. I went to read which bodies can bring up resolutions. And we brought that into the public domain. We emboldened even people in ZANU-PF who don't like CAB3 to start saying, but this did not come from Congress. It came from conference. But conference is not the one that gives power or that brings the resolutions that must be implemented by the ZANU-PF Central Committee. But guys, would these discussions have happened? Would these ideas have been ventilated? And would these ideas have gotten enough publicity from a mouthpiece that can push them if we didn't get to a point where Rutendo was opposing this thing and we started sharing these ideas, we held these spaces, and eventually what were fringe ideas became mainstreamed through a person like me articulating them? Would ZANU-PF be coming, and with the advice of the president becoming to even dialogue with me, if our arguments were not strong enough? And would the arguments have been strong enough had I not opposed and had you guys not made your contributions and I carried some of your contributions?